Welcome, everybody, to this week's Distressed Property Call. This podcast and broadcast is brought to you by HomeLoanAdvocates. That's right, my partner David Bartels at HomeLoanAdvocate. They specialized in distressed property solutions for buyers, sellers, investors, and realtors across the country. Doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter the situation you're in. If you're working on a distressed property and you need some assistance, call 805-413-8000. Again, that number is 805-413-8000. Ask for David Bartels or visit HomeLoanAdvocates.com. Or if you'd like, send David an email at david@HomeLoanAdvocates.com. This episode is also brought to you by Monster Marketing. That's right. That's the reason this call started and why we do it each and every week. Monster Marketing. It is a direct marketing method that I created to get face-to-face with people that have missed payments. It's literally 3% of the market, some more in other areas, but Monster Marketing guarantees face-to-face results with these people. We will give you proven step-by-step coaching, training, and mentoring so that you can convert those individuals into listings or deals, depending on being a realtor or investor. If you would like to find out more, go visit honish.com. That's HONISH.com.
Hello, everybody. David Bartels here, filling in for Mr. Lee Honish. So I want to wish Lee well. I hope everything's going home. They had a little medical thing going on this morning, so I agreed to sit in for him today. And we'll start by just making sure that you can hear me. So if I could get some feedback. Okay, Victoria, hello. Thank you very much. I think everything's okay. Just something they needed to do, and another day wasn't going to work. So if now maybe I'm showing you my screen. Can everybody see the screen here as well for closure and bankruptcy? Beautiful. Thanks so much for that feedback. So we're going to kind of go into it maybe a little different format. I'd love to answer any questions that you have. I thought today we would talk about foreclosure and bankruptcy, but we can talk about anything you want related to distressed properties, tagging, overcoming objections, going to the door. All you have to do is just type your question into the question pane, and I'll be happy to address that for you. So one of the things I want to talk about, as I said, is foreclosure and bankruptcy. This is one of the guides I'm showing to you right here that is in the AMS package, Advocate Marketing System package that we do. And the reason we created this particular form here was because a lot of people think that bankruptcy is, the way out of foreclosure. And the truth of the matter is that bankruptcy doesn't solve anything. All bankruptcy does is it eliminates the foreclosure date on a temporary basis, and it does not work repeatedly. But almost 100% of the time when we go to the door, when somebody says that they've gotten it taken care of, what it generally means, what it often means is that they have filed bankruptcy, and some bankruptcy attorney has convinced them that if they file bankruptcy that their foreclosure date will be postponed, and they'll be able to leverage that in order to get them a loan modification, which really just isn't true. Now, this is not really a document that I can send out to everybody as it's part of the Advocate Marketing System, but it's got some good data in here that perhaps I can share with you. Is the screen too small? Can you guys see the screen okay, or do I need to try to expand this a little bit? Let's see if I can make the view a little bigger. And we'll do page width, see if that helps. All right, I know that'll be easier to see. I'm right there. So basically what bankruptcy does is it provides a temporary postponement of the foreclosure. So, and generally that stay is 30 to 60 days. And that's really the only reason that you should file bankruptcy. So unless there's some other reasons to do it, some people file it only for the purposes of postponing the foreclosure. Others file it because they have a legitimate issue related to debt, and they're looking for relief from all their debt, not just the foreclosure, and they have an intention to go all the way through the process, which is fine. That's a great reason to file bankruptcy. What is not a great reason to file bankruptcy is because you want it to solve the mortgage problems that you're having. And when I say you, I mean the homeowner you're trying to, assist here. So it just acts as an injunction, which stops the mortgager from proceeding. And that, like I said, will buy you a little time. So when you buy a home and you default on the loan and they're foreclosing, which is basically the ultimate foreclosure action, what bankruptcy does, it allows you to stop that action, stop any attempt from them to collect any debts, and inserts the federal court in the middle of those proceedings, whereby a trustee kind of starts to handle those negotiations as a result of the bankruptcy filing. And they're going to also find out what the person who filed, the petitioner, I believe they call it, they're going to figure out what their assets are so they can figure out how and if they can pay. Now, there are two types of bankruptcy. One is a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which is a total liquidation of all assets. And Chapter 13, these are the kinds that homeowners generally file. The Chapter 13 bankruptcy is a reorganization of debt, which basically means that they're going to get on a payment plan for the next 5 years based on what their assets are. The judge may order them to liquidate their assets in order to pay creditors and put them on a 5-year payment plan, at which time at the end of the 5 years, if they made all their payments, then their bankruptcy would be discharged, and they won't have any debt any further, and they can start all over again. So there are two types of foreclosures that we have to deal with. One is a judicial foreclosure, and one is a non-judicial foreclosure. So in the judicial foreclosure, it states that the process begins when they file the foreclosure. In California, we are a non-judicial foreclosure state. Basically, judicial means that you need a court to approve the bankruptcy, a judge. It's basically a lawsuit that the bank files against the homeowner. And so a judge really takes over the ruling. And in a non-judicial foreclosure, it's a streamlined, they call it a streamlined case, where it doesn't require court approval, and the bank simply retain a trustee in order to execute according to the laws, where the bank doesn't actually do the foreclosure. The trustee actually does the foreclosure on behalf of the banks. So there's more information, that we can get to, but for the most part, we don't really need to spend a lot of time on this. Either you're working with a judicial foreclosure or a non-judicial foreclosure. And filing a bankruptcy will stop either type of those as long as the foreclosure hasn't occurred. So one of the things that happens is if we get to the 11th hour, say there was a foreclosure date Friday, okay, and it was a non-judicial foreclosure, say in California, we could go down to the federal bankruptcy court, and near me, there's one in Santa Barbara, and there's one in Woodland Hills. It's not the county courthouse, it's the federal courthouse. Bankruptcy is a federal case, not a state or county judicial motion. So you go to the federal courthouse, and you go to their bankruptcy department, and they have a self-service desk. They have all the forms that are there. You again being the seller, homeowner, can go in there and fill out those forms, go to the window, and they can elect to pay the fee, the filing fee, or not pay the filing fee. Bankruptcy is the only type of legal filing where you can check a box that says that you don't have the funds to pay for the for the filing fee, and you'll have that fee, the payment of the fee, evaluated as part of your case, and the trustee will decide whether or not you have the ability to pay the court filing fees or not. So whether or not I've never actually done this, by the way, but we've been able to coach people to go down and do it, which is why I know it's easy. You don't need an attorney to do it, though some people prefer to do that. You can download the forms online and fill them out and take them in. They will help you fill those forms out if you fill them out incorrectly. Some people prefer to go a day or two earlier to make sure they've gotten it all done and then say, well, all right, I want to wait a day or two before I decide if I actually want to be able to do this. I recommend waiting until the 11th hour to do it, till there are absolutely no more options, because there is a limited number of times that you can do this. So when you go down and you file, certainly the first time, you're not going to have to, it's going to stop the sale for sure. And so that's basically what it's going to do. But there are some criteria for that. So if you file for 7 or 13 bankruptcy, it's automatically going to trigger the stay, and there's nothing else that you're going to be able to do. That generally will buy you 30 to 60, sometimes 90 days in order to figure out another way to work it out. So the only purpose of filing a bankruptcy, if we're talking about getting a loan mod or keeping a house out of foreclosure, is simply to give you time to work out one or the other alternatives, which almost 100% of the time mean get a loan modification or sell the house. So if it's somebody who has a loan, who's trying to get a loan modification, then it gives them, because the banks say, well, there's not enough time for us to fully review your loan mod because of the foreclosure date, so we're not going to do it. So if you get a postponement for 30 days, then you would instantly resubmit the loan mod application, and then the loan mod application on its own would generally get you more than 30 days. So now they'll stop the foreclosure proceedings. They'll get 30 days to pursue the loan modification. And generally speaking, if it's still in review when it comes back up, then you'll get another automatic stay, and you don't need to file foreclosure to get it done again. The risky part of this is that they reset the foreclosure date, and then the loan mod gets denied, and then a week later you've got the foreclosure date again. They're not supposed to do that. However, they do that once in a while, but they ideally they will not do that. So you have to be careful. The other thing that you have to be careful about is filing the loan modification as a way to stop the foreclosure, which is what a lot of people do. And then they say no at the 11th hour, and then you got nowhere to go. So as long as let's say the foreclosure date was Friday morning at 10 a.m. As long as I have it date stamped Friday morning at 9:59 a.m., 9:59, because they date stamp these applications, the foreclosure will be postponed. The problem is if the foreclosure is at 10 a.m. on Friday, you get it stamped at 9:59 a.m., all the forms get sent over to the bank. It may take 2, 3, 4 hours before it gets officially registered, and many times that it will have sold. But the bankruptcy doc requires the bank to rescind the sale, even if it's to a third party. Now, most foreclosure auctions end up reverting to the beneficiary, which means they don't actually sell. They go back to the seller, or they go back to the lender as a real estate owned, at which time they would immediately rescind it. But sometimes it gets sold to a third party, at which time that third party ends up having to get rescinded. So as long as, and they can do this multiple times, as long as the one previous bankruptcy case is dismissed within the past year, the automatic stay goes into effect for 30 days. The bank has the opportunity to reinstatement. And as long as they haven't filed 2 or more previous bankruptcies dismissed within the last year, it doesn't go into effect. So in other words, the first time it's going to be an automatic stay. The second time, it's probably going to be an automatic stay. And the third time, it's not an automatic stay. So one of the tricks that some people do is the husband will file the first time, and then the spouse will file the second time, and then the husband will file the third time, and then the wife will file the fourth time, and then it starts to get a little more complicated. Which is why we want to wait until the very last minute to file the bankruptcy in order to stop the foreclosure. Okay, so I'm getting some questions, so let me just stop and try to answer some of these questions. So Victoria's asking, she wants to know why she sees houses in foreclosure for years. Why do the banks allow people to stay for 5, 6, 7 years and more? But some homeowners are being foreclosed on. So here's the reason. Number one, what we see is that it tends to be the higher end houses that are allowed to stay in their house. The more expensive the house, the more likely it is that they're going to end up not being foreclosed on, because the bank does not want to write that house off. So they end up being foreclosure, especially if it's occupied. If it's occupied, they know that that house is going to hold its value, even appreciate more when it's occupied than it is not occupied. So if it's not occupied, they have a tendency to foreclose a lot more quicker than if it is occupied. If it is a high-end home and their loss is going to be great, it's way underwater, they have a tendency to allow them to stay in it while they just accrue the interest and penalties. However, if it's a high-end home and they have equity, they have a tendency not to allow it to sit in foreclosure, because the bank can just liquidate that asset and go from there. So there are a lot of factors why they let some houses they don't foreclose on some houses, why they foreclose quickly on other houses, and those are the reasons. The ones that have a tendency to stay in foreclosure for 4, 5, 6 years, sellers and homeowners not making payments during those 5 or 6 years, is because it's either extremely underwater and the house is going to take a significant loss, and the banks don't want to write those things down. And they would rather have somebody, and somebody's in the house, which means they're using time and appreciation in order to get to a point where that debt is more manageable. So that's really what's going on. You're seeing them now starting to go after those houses. And by the way, this is the time of the year when they really get serious about it, because they want to, if they're going to write it down or take the loss, this is the time of year they want to do it. So you actually see them get pretty aggressive with foreclosures this time of year. You've actually started seeing that in August. July and August, we saw a spike in foreclosure filings. And the reason for that is that they're running automatic valuations on these properties. They're looking at it, and they're looking at it against what is owed, and they actually have a computer making the decision based on whether or not it's in a loss mitigation range that they can manage, and they want to write down this year versus let it roll into next year and see how the market goes. But now that they're not overwhelmed by foreclosures like they were, they're going ahead and just starting to suck it up, and you're seeing a little less leniency. Now, Donald Hello is asking what's the quickest time you've seen the bank obtain a relief of stay? And the answer is they don't generally try to do them that quickly unless it's been in there a while. But the bank can request a hearing for the lift of stay, and almost 100% of the time, especially if it's a short sale, the bank will grant relief of stay. And what the stay means is that they can't foreclose. Relief of stay means they can foreclose. So what happens is that if a bank wants to foreclose on the property and it's in bankruptcy, they can immediately file, and within 2 or 3 weeks they can get a lift of stay, and then and then they can resume counting the days to foreclosure. So remember, I don't know all the states, but I know in California, from the time they file a notice of default, which is generally 120 or more days after they go into default. Once they file the notice of default, they've got to wait 90 days, and then they can file a notice of sale, notice of trustee sale, and then that is another 21 days, so it's 111 days. And if during that period of time the homeowner files a bankruptcy, the bank can simply, as part of the hearing, which can happen within 2 weeks, can ask for a lift to stay. We see very little of that, almost none, of banks actually asking for a lift to stay in situations where there's negative equity. The truth is, they would prefer the homeowner will cooperate, with them, which is the reason why I say, especially in the coaching group, one of the reasons why I say it. Oftentimes, if you have a short-term objective to stay in the house, because one of the questions that we ask homeowners when they're trying to fight off foreclosure, one of the things that we have to get clear about with them, are they trying to postpone the foreclosure so that they can save their house and own it and pay it off and be mortgage free with that house at some point? In other words, keep it forever, or they're just not quite ready and they just need a little more time. And when I started asking that question, I've always been surprised that I thought that their goal was to keep it forever. And that's generally not the case. More often than not, the homeowner recognizes that it's a bad investment for them and the bank. They recognize that it's not a house that they're going to keep forever. But generally, there's something related to the family, kids in school, some family event. They want to, this time of year, we're saying, can you just get us to Christmas? Can you just get us, my parents are coming in for Thanksgiving. Can you just get me until, the end of the year? Those are the kinds of reasons. What we'll start, and we hear it now too, is my kids are going to be moving from, 6th grade to 7th grade at the end of the year, or they're graduating high school at the end of the school year. Can we just want to stay in the house until the summer? And when they say that, I often say, well, before you file bankruptcy, loan mod is not the way to go. Before you do, what we ought to do is shift gears and agree to cooperate with the bank. This is how you move them off the loan mod cycle and into the sales cycle. The better strategy is to cooperate with the bank, and even if they have some equity, and submit an offer to sell the company. So we cooperate with the bank by helping them liquidate the assets, and that process generally takes 6, 8, 12 months or longer. Which means if your goal is to make it all the way until June before you transition into a new house, is we would simply offer the bank less than what is owed on it, and then we would go through this negotiation process that should easily get you to the summer. And if for some reason that strategy is not working and the bank is going to be more aggressive, then we still have loan mod, we still have bankruptcy, we still have those bullets in our tool belt. Bullets and a tool belt don't go together, but you know what I mean. So we still have those tools in our tool belt so that we can buy you the time that you're looking for. So a lot of people think, well, I've got to get a loan mod and then I'll sell the house over the summer. And what you're better off is get them thinking selling now as a short sale is probably a better strategy to get them till June than a loan modification. Because if they get the loan mod, then they're going to have to start making payments right away on a house that they don't want to invest any more money in. I would much rather see them banking that money for 6 months. So I have the conversation with them. And if you get a loan mod based on your income, they're going to ask, assuming that you get it approved anyway, which is a low probability. But assuming that you can get the loan mod approved, this is what your payment's going to be. And you can take what their monthly gross income, multiply it by 31%. So if someone had a $10,000 a month gross income, or a family had a $10,000 a month in gross income, their mortgage payment is going to be $3,100, 31% of that. And so what I would say is that your payment is going to be $3,100 rather than get a loan mod and start paying $3,100 a month. What we ought to do is be cooperating with the bank, list it for sale. We don't have to put a sign in your yard. We don't have to communicate with your neighbors. I'll get one of my investor buyers to write a low ball offer, because the way that works is we submit an offer. The bank takes 30 days to take a look at it. They realize that's too low. They counter with a higher offer. We submit a counter offer that's a little higher. They take about 30 days to respond. Then they counter with maybe a lower offer, the same offer. And that process goes back and forth, back and forth. And the next thing you know, you're 6-7 months into it. And then, maybe a few months into it, then we need to put a sign in the yard, and then we need to maybe start showing the house. But if our objective is just to get you until June, this is going to be the most effective strategy in order to string this out and go from there. In the meantime, you're 7 months away from June. You're taking $3,000 a month and you're putting it away because you need to start making the mortgage payment anyway. But instead of paying the bank, you pay yourself. You set up a special account at the bank or the credit union. And 7 months from now, you've socked away $21,000 that you can use in order to help you get transitioned into a new house. We can probably get the bank to give you $1,500, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 in a relocation incentive. If we get them to give you $10,000, now you have $31,000 in the bank. Let's say that you go rent a great place, because you could probably get more house for less money as a renter. Let's say it's $2,500 a month, and you need to do first and last and a security deposit, because you're gonna have to offer the homeowner a little more security. So now you take $7,500 of your $31,000 windfall that you have. Maybe it's 25, but you take $7,500 of that. Even if it was just $25,000, now you have $17,500 left over. I don't know if I'm doing the math right. So if you do $17,500 and you rent that place for a year, and within a year, FHA will underwrite a new mortgage for you. Okay, certainly within 2 years, and so you only need 3.5% down. Now you have the $17,500, and if you use that as your 3.5% down payment, now you can go out and buy a $500,000 house, and you already have the down payment set aside in order to get it done. You can get a 15-year mortgage, which would probably be the same or less than the $3,100 that you'd have to pay in order to keep this house. And 16, 17 years from now, you've got a house free and clear, as opposed if you tried to stay in this house and you're trying to buy a $400,000 house for $500,000. Now you're going to clean up your balance sheet. You're going to gain $100,000 on your personal balance sheet the day that you sell, this house. You would never buy a $400,000 house for $500,000. And it might take you 10 or 15 years before you even get to the break-even point in terms of equity, because if you get a loan mod, they're probably going to extend your loan as much as 40 years in order to get that to 40 years. And it may take you 30 to 40 years before you pay it off, as opposed to letting this one go, rent for a year or two, lower your payment, take the money that you banked, put it into a new house, buy a new house in a year or two for $500,000, get a 15-year mortgage for the same payment as you would pay to keep this house, and now you own your house free and clear 16, 17 years from now. Which is the better term, long-term decision for your family? And that's how you get them to shift from going to the loan mod. And the tool and the bankruptcy tool is just used to buy them the time they need to execute that strategy. Does that make sense? It's a long answer. Okay. So Bob is saying, I joined the call at 12:02 and you were talking. Are you the host for the call today? Yes, I am. So we're just talking about bankruptcy and foreclosure and different ways that you use it to execute a strategy. Because the strategy is basically only to buy you time to do one of two things: sell the house or to get a loan modification. And if their objective is that there is just to they just need a few more months in the house. They're not ready. They're just trying to get to a break in school, or they're trying to get past the holiday. Maybe there's a birthday and they've got, maybe they got friends coming for spring break or family, and they just don't want to deal with the sign in the yard. They don't want to deal with telling, their family that they're facing foreclosure. They just, and by talking to them about selling the house, we get to say, and now you get to tell your family that you're selling the house versus you lost the house. So it's really easier on the ego for them to be able to do that. Okay. So thanks, JC. I appreciate he's saying great stuff. It is really a good strategy. So one of the things that I notice when I talk to you guys about loan mods is that, oftentimes you guys get really determined to help these homeowners get a loan mod. I mean, you really dig in, and I admire the tenacity and the motivation. And, in a lot of cases, you're assuming their fear, and their anxiety, and you're really trying to help them out of this jam. But at the end of the day, you have to understand that as advocates, our objective is to assist them in getting a loan mod that they're probably not going to get. And we're establishing the trust. So at some point they come back to us and they say, hey, I got turned down for my loan mod. Now what? And you're saying, well, we need, let's figure out what the options are. We can take a look at it. We can either reapply for the loan modification, or we can go with one of the other strategies, depending on what your objectives are. And you schedule an appointment. I can get, I'm a little booked today, but I can get to your house at 6 o'clock tonight, or we can meet sometime tomorrow. What's your preference? And you use it as a reason to meet with them. And then you sit down and you talk about the different strategies. You don't say, well, your option is to sell or to get a loan mod, and they're turning you down for the loan mod. You sit down with them and say, okay, so we got a couple of options here, but before we figure out what the option are, let me ask you a couple of questions to get clear about what your objectives are. So, a lot of people, what I found is that a lot of people recognize that the house represents a really bad investment for them. I mean, think about this. I haven't done a lot of research on your house, but if you take a look at your house, if you were to go out and buy a new house today, would you pay $500,000 for a $400,000 house? And they say no. I said, you realize that when you're applying for a loan modification, you're upside down by $100,000, like it appears that you probably are, maybe more. That's exactly what you're doing. You're negotiating to buy a house that's $100,000 upside down that might take you 15 years to get to the break-even point. That takes $100,000 of net worth off of your personal balance sheet and really puts you in a position where you may never get to a place where you have financial security. And it's actually one of those instances where owning is way worse than renting, because you could probably rent a better house in the same school district for less money than you would end up having to pay on a house that you're really only technically renting, because mathematically it probably never gets to the point for you where it makes sense for you to pay it off and own it. You're a lot better off letting it go, and instead of paying the bank, pay yourself the money for as long as we can keep you in the house. So if we can shift the strategy and we can keep you in this house for 6 months, and instead of paying a $2,500 a month mortgage payment, you can save $15,000, and then we can get you another $5,000 or $10,000 from the bank in relocation. Now you stay in the house 6 months. Now you got $20,000 in the bank. You go rent a better place for $2,500 a month. In a year, you apply for a new loan. You take your $15,000 a month and you apply for a new mortgage with 3.5% down. And next thing you know, you've bought a new house. There's a really good chance that you're going to be able to find a good value, because it's really kind of turned into a buyer's market. You're going to be able to find a great value. You're going to buy it with 3.5% down. you might be able to get a 15-year mortgage for the same payment that you would end up paying for your loan modification anyway, which means you own your house in 16 or 17 years. What would you rather do? Hold on to this house where you never own it and you rent it for too much, or to let it go and start working on the plan to own the house free and clear in 16 or 17 years? And they say, no, that's a better plan. Exactly. It's a better plan. So let's talk about strategy to make sure that we can stay in your house until whatever date that they did. And then you turn around and negotiate with them. All right, so I'm being a little redundant in order to make the point a couple of different ways. So there's not really a script to do this. We cover it in the coaching calls. It's recorded. This is being recorded, so you can listen to it again. Donald's saying we did not ask them enough questions. Exactly. That's generally what happens. I think a big mistake that we make in conversion is that they say they want to get a loan mod and we offer to help them get a loan mod. We assume that that's the only option that they're going to consider. And I think the fact of the matter is that a loan mod may not be the best option for them to achieve their objectives. So it's just like selling any kind of house but I mean, if you don't do it, you should do it. But when I sit down with sellers or potential sellers, I want to know, when they want to sell, where they're going, when they need to be there. Is this a house that you have to sell, or is it something that you want to sell? I want to know what their level of motivation is and what their urgency is, because if they've got a lot of urgency and they want to overprice their house like a lot of people do, I'm a lot more likely to take an overpriced listing that I know they have to sell in 3 months than to take an overpriced listing on somebody who doesn't really care if they sell, where they'll sell it if they can get their price, but they're fine staying another 5 years if that's what they need to do. Their motivation tells me take the high price listing or don't take the high price listing. If they're motivated and they have urgency and they take a high price listing and we have the talk, I said, okay, well, what are you going to do if you don't get this price in a month and you're now out of time? Are you going to be willing? Are you going to adjust the price, or what? Now they're playing a game of chicken with themselves, and we get to have that conversation, and they're going to be a lot more pliable and flexible than if they don't really care about selling. They don't really need the go, that it's a want, not a need. That seller is going to be a lot tougher, in terms of price negotiations and price reductions, even after advising them what the right price should be for best results, they decide they want to go for this higher price. And we agree on what the strategy is going to be, because I what if them. I say, what if you can't get that price? How are you going to feel about selling it at this lower price? And then I talk to them about what happens. And the same thing with people who are getting a loan mod. I ask them, I say, so what's your plan if you can't get the loan mod? What are you going to, yes, I think that we ought to apply one more time. We got nothing to lose, but what happens if you can't get the loan modified? And I make them start thinking about that again. And usually they say, listen, I know that we're probably not going to get it. I want to try one more time. And if not, then we need to start thinking about selling. And then I ask, well, if you were to sell, if you were to move, when would you, ideally, what would be the right time to make that transition into a new place? And then we get to have a conversation about that. So before I sit down and start doing the loan, helping them with the loan mod paperwork and start talking about the options, I want to understand what their objectives are, because there may be better options. And way more than half the time, when I understand the reason they want more time and I understand what their options are, I get to tell them, I said, listen, a loan mod is not the right strategy. And I get to explain to them why. I said, the better strategy in this case is to cooperate with the bank to liquidate the house and help them sell the house to get their money back in exchange for this, 6 or 8 months in the house, so that and that gives us the time and the money we need to help you get transition into a new place and put yourself in a much better financial situation. And then they always ask, well, what do you mean by that? And then I get explained, all the, put all the different strategies together, and they say, I see how that makes sense. And then they say, well, what if that doesn't work? And what if that doesn't work? And I said, well, then we can always retreat and we can go back, we can try the loan mod again. We've got bankruptcy as a tool. We've got these different things that we can do if that doesn't work. Okay. And Victoria's saying, but can a client prove with comps that the house is not worth the price in the market, and the lower the value makes the loan mod less with the new market value? Well, the value of the house has nothing to do with what their payment is going to be. It has nothing to do with what the payment is going to be, except it's used in the NPV, the net present value calculation, so that the bank can decide, do they make more money by modifying or do they make more money by foreclosing? So when they make more money by modifying, that's generally one of these situations where they've been in foreclosure by 5 years. That person that's been in foreclosure and because they've got major negative equity, they have a very high probability of getting a loan mod done, even if they wouldn't otherwise qualify, because because the loss would be so great at foreclosure. So they'd rather take their chance on a loan mod that's got a 40% redefault rate than with a liquidation sale where they don't really have any recourse. Once they choke it down, and they've got to move on from there. When I'm talking to them about buying a $500,000 house for $400,000, basically it's the refinance amount. So you're taking what their loan balance is plus their arrearages. So if they haven't made a payment for 5 years and they've been making, $2,000 a month, that's $120,000 on top of what their balance is. And when they get a loan mod, basically now they're going to be, if their loan balance is $500,000 and they're $100,000 in arrearage, now their loan mod is going to be $600,000, because that stuff doesn't go away. They don't eat it. They add that arrearage into the loan mod, and where that gets calculated is in the waterfall that they do, because when they go to calculate, can they hit the target payment, they're lowering the payment in 1/8 of a point increments down to a floor of 2%. And then they're extending the term in 6-month increments all the way out to 480 months, which is 40 years for those of you that are counting, all the way out to 480 months until they can get to that target payment. And if they can get to the target payment, which is 31% of the gross monthly income, if they can get to that monthly payment by lowering the rate to 2% and then extending the term to 480, then they'll do a loan mod. But if they can't, they're probably going to deny the loan mod. Sometimes what they'll do is that they'll do a loan mod for a lower amount. They'll defer a big chunk of the mortgage, but they add it onto a balloon payment that the seller eventually is going to have to pay. So you might get a 480-month term at this payment, but on the 480th month you owe $100,000 still. And you never get, it's like leasing your house at that point. Like you lease a car, and if you get to the end of the term and you want it, you've got to pay the residual amount. Some banks will do that. They'll create a deferment, a single payment deferment on the last payment. So they've got to either write a check for that amount, or they've got to refinance it, just like you would if you were leasing a car. It's really a bad financial deal. There's no reason for somebody that's underwater that wants to move for them to stay in their house. They're doing themselves a disservice. They're a lot better off to figure out, look at the options for buying a house. So if they had a $500,000 mortgage balance and $100,000 arrearage, I'm going to be calculating their payment, that are going to be getting a $600,000 mortgage on a $400,000 house, whatever the case may be. So that's where it is. So Donald's saying, are you using central communications? Yes. Have you changed your script any? No. Victoria, so the bank will let them say 6 to 8 months or longer. It just depends. So, I mean, we've seen that. How long? Well, if you've done a short sale, how long does it take to do? People say, well, how long does it? People ask me all the time, how long does it take to do a short sale? I said, well, if you're giving the bank what they asked for, in other words, you're making a market value offer to the bank. It probably takes 30 days. But if you make an offer that's well below market value, if that's what you're trying to do, then it could take a year to be able to get it done. And the analogy that I use is buying a car analogy. So when you go to buy a car, you pick the car out and you sit down with the salesperson, and one of you starts the negotiation. I guess they do, and they say, okay, the car is going to be $20,000, and that's going to be a $400 a month car payment and is that okay with you? And you say, no, I'm not paying a penny over 300. And then you guys arm wrestle there for a minute, and you stick to your guns 300, and he goes back into this mystery room where you can't hear or see them, and has a conversation with the sales manager, presumably. And the sales manager finally comes, then 20, 30 minutes, they come back and they say, okay, here's what I can do. We're at 390. And then you go to 310, and he disappears again for 20 or 30 minutes. And he comes back at 380, and you go to 320, and then disappears for 20 or 30 minutes. Well, the same thing happens when you negotiate a short sale with the bank. They want $500,000 for your house. We offer $400,000. The difference is that when we offer them $400,000, they take 30 days or so to evaluate it and decide what they're willing to do, and then they come back at $500,000, so that's 30 days. And then we go back and we say 410, and we send it back to them, and then they take 3 or 4 weeks, and they come back at 390. Okay, and then we look at it, and we take a week to respond, and then we counter them back at 420,000, and then they take 3 or 4 weeks before they respond, and they come back. And so this process goes back and forth, and before you know it, you're 5, 6, 7, 8 months into this process really easily. It's entirely possible that's going to do. Now, it doesn't always work out that way, and there are a lot of circumstances and we don't have the information where it may turn out differently. But it is very typical for it to take 4 to 6 months to get a short sale done. And if we negotiate hard, and we negotiate with the intent of delaying the close of escrow until you're ready to move, it could easily take 6 or 8 months where we finally agree, or we have to go back on the market and we ask the bank to give us 30 or 60 days to find a new buyer. Those are all techniques that we're responsible for doing, but our objective here is not to sell your house for the highest amount of money, because what do you care? It's underwater. The bank cares, not you. Our objective is to negotiate in a manner that's going to take 6 or 8 months for us to do that, so that you can keep your kid in the same school and not disrupt school until they graduate from high school, until we can get to the birthday party, until we can get past Christmas, whatever it is they said that they wanted to do. Because when they say, well, can we get until June? I said, well, what makes June so important? And I make them tell me. And then I insert, doing it this way, we should be able to get you here so you can, and we add the benefit back in. Okay, so Victoria's asking, and the bank will know they're putting their payment in a savings account. How will the bank know? The bank only knows if you tell them. So, I'm not recommending that you tell them. I'd say that they go open up a brand new account only for that at a bank that's different than the bank that they have their mortgage with, and do that. And if they're concerned about that, then they should do it in a kid's name, or they should do it in another trusted family member's name. There are 1,000 ways, to do it. But I would not be doing that. They ought to. But I said, you need to start. Before I tell them this, I say, let me ask you this: if you got we'll use the $10,000 income and $3,100 a month target payment, excuse me, as an example, I said, let's say that you submitted this to the bank right now and you had to start making a $3,100 a month payment, would you be able to do that? And they say, well, first, if they say no, I said, well, then there's no reason to apply for a loan mod because it's going to be at least $3,100. This is the lowest it's going to be unless we can show them that your income is actually lower than what it is. But this is how they're going to calculate it. And sometimes that's a kind of a light bulb that goes off in their brain because they think that if they show more income, they have a better chance of getting a loan mod, and they do. But it's not. But they're not going to negotiate the loan mod like we negotiate the short sale, or like you negotiate the car payment. It's not like, well, my current payment is $3,000 a month, so I'll keep the house if you can lower my payment to $2,000 a month. Okay. Now, it's ridiculous to think about negotiating with a bank like that. That's not because A, it's not how it works, and number two, you're not buying a car. It's the overall loan amount. I mean, this is why car salespeople get you focused on the monthly payment. They don't get you focused on the price is $20,000. They don't come in and say, listen, give us full sticker price for the car. They say the payment's going to be $400 a month. Are you okay with that? They're not telling you what the term is. They're not necessarily telling you what the down payment is. You're saying, yeah, I could do $400. They say, great. Well, we just need $4,000 down to be able to get that done. They do all kinds. They get you locked in on the payment because they know it's easier to get you to agree to a payment than it is the price. Now you get to the payment all of a sudden, and you realize that you've got to put $4,000 down, and you got an 84-month loan term in order to get it done, and your total repayment of that $20,000 car loan is going to be $35,000. I'm making numbers up, okay? So you want to be in a situation where you're helping them look at the overall value. If they get a payment they can afford, but they're borrowing $500,000 on a $400,000 house, how does that help them? Okay, it may help them in the short term, but it's not going to help them in the long term, which is why we got to dig into what their objective is. What is it you're trying to do? Why is it so important that you stay in the house until June? Find out, and then offer them a strategy. And sometimes the strategy is, okay, if you want to get to June, we ought to do the loan mod. If we can get it done, fine. But here's the problem. So let's talk about what happens if it gets approved, and let's talk about what happens if it gets denied. If it gets approved, that's good news and bad news. The good news is that you will have been approved to buy a $400,000 house for $500,000, and you're going to have to start making payments right away, okay, in order to get it done, and which is fine. But the good news is that as long as you make the payments, then you'll get to decide when you want to, transition out of the house. The bad news is you're going to be paying $3,100 a month, $2,000 a month, whatever the number is, for all those months. That if there was a way that you could keep that money and pay yourself and stay in the house until June, that might be the better alternative. And they might say, well, what do you mean? Well, you have this option over here that you might want to get able to do. So, so we can apply for so I tell them about about cooperating, AKA selling, as opposed to trying to get a loan mod. And then we just go from there. And I said, so we can apply, but if this happens, then you can decide whether or not you want to do the loan mod or not, and we might be able to buy you another month, and then we turn around and say, hey, we're not going to do it. Okay, we want to help. We decided we can't afford that payment. We want to sell instead. Or if you get denied, then we can roll right into this transition plan, and we go to plan B. And if you change your mind and decide you want to get a loan mod, there's no reason to resubmit for a loan mod if your financial circumstances are the same. But if your circumstances change and it looks like it might be a loan mod might turn out to be a better thing, we can always take your house back on the market and reapply for a loan mod at that point, but your circumstances will have to change. There's no benefit of reapplying and giving the same information and hoping that this time they make a different decision. Now, if you give them new information, we can ask them to make a new decision, and I'll help you with the math to figure out whether or not you have what your probability of getting a loan mod is or isn't. And so you can make the best decision based on all the information that's available. And my objective here in communicating with you this way is not to convince you to do one over the other as much as it is to make sure you understand that there may be a better path to helping you achieve your objective. Of course, if your objective is to stay here forever, okay, and rent this house because it has sentimental value and you don't really care about the financial impact it has on you and your family and your future and your retirement and all that stuff, then that's different, and we need to do everything we can in order to get it done, even if it doesn't make good financial sense short term or long term. Okay, but if your objective is just to get to a point on a calendar and then reevaluate whether or not this house makes sense or not, or to put together a plan that allows you to be in a house that you can own, so that you can establish some financial security in retirement, okay, and really take care of your family, then there are other strategies that would be more effective. So what's more important to you? And then they'll tell you, and then you say, okay, well, let's roll our sleeves up and make that happen for you. And then you go after it, okay? So I seem to be stimulating a lot of questions with this talk. So when you sell your house, you still have those payments deducted from the final sale. Yes, that's exactly right. But if it's a short sale, it doesn't cost you anything. So, if it's equity, listen, if someone has equity and they're trying to get a loan mod, first, they're almost never going to get a loan mod. Number two, if they file bankruptcy, the bankruptcy court is probably going to make them liquidate the house. Okay. And number three, the bank is eventually going to get the house. And the conversation I have with them is we need to get as much cash out of the walls of your house as we can before the bank takes it from you. See, that's the conversation I have. You've got your life savings in the walls of these house, and the house is on fire. Okay, the bank is going to take that money. Okay, and our job is to preserve as much of that cash as possible and to get it out before the bank can take it. So what's more important to you? Because what my fear is that you're going to lose the house, okay? Unless you can come up with the money to get it caught up and resume making the payments, okay? You're going to lose the house. And my objective for you may be different than your objective, but my objective for you is to, if you're going to lose the house, to lose it with cash in the bank, as much cash as we can get for you, as opposed to losing it with no cash in the bank and maybe some debt. And the reason I say that is I've watched dozens of people, leverage all their credit cards, spend their kids' college funds, spend their life savings, spend their 401k, only to lose the house anyway. And so not only did they lose their house, they lost everything else. And if you're going backwards every single month and you're struggling, if you don't fix that cash flow problem, you're eventually going to lose the house, and there's going to be nothing left for you to do. What we need to be in is cash preservation mode, unless you think this is a very short-term problem that you're going to be able to correct. Unless you have an immediate plan in place that's going to correct this, you are going to lose the house and everything else with it, and you're better off to be proactive and preserve your cash and to get as much cash out of the walls so you leave this house better than you are today, not worse than you are today. And when you start having those conversations with people, they start to let go of the sentimental value of keeping a bedroom for a kid that's going to college and probably not coming back to live at home. Okay? I hope what I'm saying is makes sense. We need to wrap it up. I've got another meeting right at 11. So Richard's asking, do you have a formula for the calculation of minimum payment? Yeah, it's 31% of their gross income. 31%. So if their gross income is $6,000 a month, you take $6,000 a month times 0.31, and their target payment is $1,860. That's PITIA. That doesn't mean it's going to get approved. What it means is that if it gets approved, it's not going to be better than $1,860 PITIA. The A represents association fees, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and association fees. It's $1,860. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to get it approved. Now they got to see if they can make the math work. So they'll do that by lowering the interest rate in eighth of a point increments until they get 2% and preserve the term. If they can get there, if they can get to that target payment at an interest rate at 2% or above, then they'll probably get a loan mod as long as there's not a bunch of equity. And if they can't, then they start extending the term in 6-month increments, and they'll go all the way out until they hit the target payment or 480 months. And if they can do that, then they'll probably give a loan mod as long as there's not a bunch of equity. And we can show them the cash flow makes sense. And then and if they can't get the 480 months, they might do a lump sum payment at the end of the term. They might, not likely, but they might, depending on how severe the negative equity is. If it's a serious negative equity position, they might. And if it's not a serious negative equity position, they won't. And they're gonna foreclose. At the end of the day, the bank is making a decision based on math only, not emotion. They don't care that you got hit by a bus, and then your wife got cancer, and then your kid OD'd on drugs, and then your grandmother died. They don't care about any of that. At the end of the day, they're looking at your ability to repay, and they're making a decision just like they would if they were underwriting a new loan. And not exactly, it's a lot more lenient, but it's very much like they're underwriting a new loan. And at the end of the day, do they make more money by modifying, or do they make more money by foreclosing? It's not any more complicated than that. Donald's asking for a copy of my latest script with Central Communication. Sure, just send me an email reminder. And Doug, hello, Doug, I'm property radar, home status being reported, opening bid 500, equal to greater than 460. Then I look at the detail sheet to see that the auction date is now November 17th. What just happened regarding the statement of opening bid? So oftentimes the opening bid amount, is going to be reflect whatever the payoff is on the house. So oftentimes that's the way the banks do it, and that's why they end up reverting to the beneficiary, and the bank just intends to take the property back and rehab it or clean it up and then put a sign in the yard. And they'll use an REO agent to be able to do that, or they'll bundle it and sell it to an investor who's willing to pay a premium for it. So, that's what happens. If they, and so the postponement date could be something's happening in the background and they've decided it could be a bankruptcy. It could be a loan mod. It could, there could be something else in the bank decided they didn't want to foreclose and they postponed it for another 30 days. And that's why it's reflected. For property radar is usually a few days behind. It doesn't really run in the same instance, but it could. So the opening bid is $500,000. It may be that it has is equal to greater than. It may be the opening bid is going to be 460 to 500. It's how they're going to do it, or it may be opening at 460 in your example, and a reserve of 500,000. So a lot of times these they open them up much lower than they're willing to go at. But the banks put a reserve, and what the reserve means, if you're not certain, is they say, well, we'll open up the auction at $460,000, but we're not selling it unless we get offers above $500,000. So that's kind of how that works. All right, guys, we didn't get that far into it. I'm happy to continue this conversation, but I think you got the idea of how bankruptcy works in foreclosure. We can talk about it. Good questions. Glad that I was answered some of them. If you need anything, if you need me, you can, we're home loan advocates. We do short sale negotiations. Those short sale negotiations basically are free 72% of the time. So if you've got a short sale, you need somebody to handle it in any state, you send that to us. We'll take over that. There's a 72% likelihood it won't cost you anything. Even if it were to cost you something, it's 25% of the listing agent commission. So if you listed it for 3.5% list side and 2.5% buy side, that means we're only going to make 7/8. You're going to make 2 5/8, and the buyer's agent will make 2.5%. Very rarely do we get less than 6% approved for a short sale, which is another good reason to go out and work distressed properties as opposed to competing for 4, 4.5, and 5% listings, which is what we're seeing predominantly out in the marketplace right now. So if you have questions with any of that, you want more information about Advocate Marketing System, you're interested in joining the coaching group, you can, if you're in Lee's group, you can upgrade for $997. We're finishing up the group for investors right now. We might be finishing it tomorrow, but I've got it all taped and recorded so that you can get caught up very easily, and you'll get invited to all future groups, plus a lot of conversion training and documents like this designed to help you overcome objections. So thank you all very much for being a part of this today. Again, my phone number 805-413-8000. My email is david@homeloanadvocates.com. Advocates is plural. David@homeloanadvocates.com. Have a great day, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.